Hi, this is Toy with Educator.com, and we are talking about jQuery and AJAX. Particularly today, we're just going to talk about AJAX because we're just getting our feet wet with it. We're going to put something together in AJAX and we're going to make it happen. Okay, so what do we got to do? First off, let's get a data source together. Now, I already spent the weekend putting some data together. It's not very exciting data. I'm not really quite brilliant at kind of just making data up. But just so that you can see what it is, let me show you something here. This is all extra stuff, extra windows. Let me get rid of it. Hopefully it'll just pop right up. Yep, there it is. I built a table of users. Users with their emails, their phone numbers, and whether or not they're active. So, pretty simple stuff. I put in about 20 records, and then I got tired because my brain just could not think of any more names for some reason. I only know 20 people in the world. Okay. So, with that in mind, we've got the data. Now, you may choose to use any database that you would like. I, in particular, if you guys can tell, this is PHP MyAdmin. So when I work in a PHP environment, I am partial to using MySQL. But if you want to use Postgres, even if you want to use SQL Server or whatever you want, up to you. As long as it's an SQL-based database, we're pretty much good to go, simply because PHP is designed to work really, really well with SQL. Okay, so you can pick any one you want. I happen to be using MySQL. The second part of this is the generic JavaScript file. What are we going to put in this generic JavaScript file? Now, the reason why I say generic, it means because I want to basically every page on my site is going to load this generic JS file. Everything that I put in this generic JS file is going to be applicable for every page across the site. Now, the reason why I do this is because I know that people like to put all their JavaScript in one area, in one file, because it's a quicker load. However, there are times that, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, there are times that it's better to split it up into generics and specific. And the reason why is because when you start working on really large-scale projects, when you're talking about not 5 pages, not 20, but 20 pages, 100-page sites, and you've got all of a sudden this JavaScript that's just this file that's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're trying to debug one little function for this one little page it's only used on that one page. You have to go through thousands of lines of code. It is not fun at midnight when the live date is tomorrow. Okay, so I like to break stuff up into a generic JavaScript file first, of stuff that's always going to be used. It's going to be used always across on every single page. And a good example of this is, oh, you know what, let's create one. I haven't even created it yet. So let's create one, and I called it edu.js. So let's create a new item. JavaScript file, and it's going to be edu.js. Really great example of this is I'm going to create a spinner variable. We all know that spinner, that thing that spins when you do AJAX stuff. And we're going to now I pre-created a spinner graphic called spinner.gif. One of my favorite sites out there is, I think it's, if you just do a Google on AJAX spinner, it'll bring it to my favorite site, which I've created dozens of spinners with dozens of colors. It's great. And and it just loads it up for you, and you're good to go. So that's a perfect example of a line of JavaScript that would be used on almost every single page on your site, because on almost every single page on your site, you're going to probably be using a spinner. Okay. Another line that that we're going to be using right now is this. We're going to create a function called get XML HTTP object, and this is we're starting the call now. JavaScript has a function, has a class for XML and HTTP, and this is starting the call for AJAX stuff. This is the mechanism which instantiates that link across from the client to the backend web server. So so basically, that link will probably be used on every single page. So that's why I put it in the generic file. So I have it preloaded up here because I can never ever seem to get the syntax completely correct. So you'll excuse me if I just kind of type away on this, and I probably should have just copy and pasted it from somewhere. Try catch. Now, IE9 just in this time frame, in my time frame, I'm not sure when you're watching it, but IE9 just came out, and I don't know if they still try to continue to use their own request model, or if they finally have gotten onto the standard way. But you want to add this stuff in for IE just because, in case they haven't, or someone is on an old browser that doesn't have it. They use ActiveX objects and msxml 2.xml http catch try. Oops, sorry, my bad here. Doesn't help that my typing is horrendous today. So as you notice, I'm kind of doing some extra stuff for Microsoft browsers. And oh, I love Microsoft browsers so much. Then we got to return it so that we can actually use this object that we have now created. All right. That's pretty much the generic stuff. Now, having done that, now we're going to do the HTML file. We're going to get to this specific later, but we need to set up the HTML file. And that is because how can we be specific? How can we know which objects we're going to manipulate on that page if we haven't set up objects yet in the elements yet in the HTML file? So I think instead of to spare you all the boring typing, I've already done all this stuff for you. I've set up an H1, a div with more H1, more H's and more divs, and just stuff. And that looks like once I get the browser up, looks like this. Okay, so we've got this link here called Get Users, and basically, I guess my intention is we've got this database via AJAX. Let's get the users from that database. All right, so cool. By the way, we want to put it, where's the code? We want to put it here. Okay, so you can see. So that means in the specific JS file, because not every page are we going to want to get users. That's why I'm putting the code for that into the specific JS file. Probably only a couple pages I want to put in all the users. Okay, so let's create a specific JS file, and if you recall, we called it lesson 3.js, how intuitive. So let's put it in here. Another JavaScript file, lesson 3. And this is, once again, all stuff you can find on the internet in terms of documentation on how to build your AJAX request. Okay? And in this particular case, we're going to build an AJAX users request. Before I go there, I want to show you the actual button here. This is the button. If you look at here, that's what this says. So we can do an inspect element. By the way, if you haven't installed Firebug, I think it comes automatic in Firefox 10, which was just released. But if you have an older browser, you haven't installed Firebug, you really need to in order to do all your debugging. So we can see here that here's the link, and all that stuff I showed you before in the HTML page is showing up on the browser. Now, the reason why we need the return false is because the natural inclination, the default behavior of a link, is to go to another page. That's the default behavior. If it does not, in this particular case, it does not have an href, you're probably very, let's go this scratch paper. You're probably very used to writing code like this. Href equals some other page dot HTML go to some other page. And that is the natural inclination of a link element. The thing is that we have found that we have a need now to just have these links we just need the click event to happen. We don't really want it to go anywhere else. We just want that click, that interaction. So by doing onClick, which is the event, which is one of the events, one of the built-in events for an A, and we do return false, it actually never goes to some other page, but it does record that click event. So now we can say, okay, onClick, get users. Let's build a function, a JavaScript function called getUsers, and we're not going to go anywhere, but we're going to make it do that JavaScript function called getUsers, which we are now building in our specific JavaScript file. Okay, so let's do it. So now what we do is we do a var XML, we set up the link, we set up the XML link to the server. And if you recall, we've already built this function, get XML HTTP objects, except it's totally going to fail because I've put capital letters in where I shouldn't. Here, this is the same as we've built the function already here. So now it sets up the link. I'm going to set up this just because you should see how it's built. We're not really going to use it, but I equals, ID equals. These are parameters. I could set up several parameters. let's just set up one so you can see it. And then we're going to do XML HTTP, which is the object, the link that we've set up, and there's several methods associated with them. One is onReady state change is equal to function. Basically, if something is going on with an object, let's evaluate what's going on and do something appropriate. So if this object, the link that we have, is in its ready state, it means it's already done the processing that we've asked it to do, and we want that answer, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that answer and we're gonna put it in get element. We're gonna put it in, like I said, we want to put it in here, in the grid, because we have a grid and we have a space for it. We've created a div space to put that grid in. So now we're going to put it here. Actually, I don't need to do that because it already knows it's an ID, not class. This is not get element by class. I don't think there is a JavaScript call called get element by class. It's all by IDs. So get element by ID. Grid, we want the grid element, and we want the stuff that's coming, that's now that the request has already been made and it's ready to be downloaded into this, into my div called grid, and that property is called response text. This is the property where all the answers get stuffed into. Okay? Now, if it's not ready yet, then what we're going to do is, meaning it's still working on it, the database is still working, we're going to, oops, this is, my bad. We want to set the inner text equal to blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's been a while since I've worked with this raw AJAX stuff. So inner HTML is equal to, we don't want this, where it doesn't exist yet, but what does exist is our spinner. So now you're seeing how this is being built here. The inner HTML, which means this part here, I'll spread it out so you can see, but this part here, this inner part, right now has a couple of spaces, but what we want to do, what we're saying here is that this inner part of the grid, once the data is ready, it's in response text, stuff it into the inner part. If it's not ready, then just put the spinner in there, okay? So now it needs to know what you're doing. Like, all right, we've set up the mechanism. Now we have to build the mechanism, okay? You want to make the real call. Like, how do we know what we want to do? So let's do this. So XML HTTP dot open. Now this is a method of the XML HTTP object is open. We're going to use the post method. Now, as you know, in HTML, PHP, there's two ways of sending information back to the web server. It's with get and post. I particularly like to use post because in older IE browsers, get doesn't always work. And I've spent hours debugging that, only to find that get doesn't work. So I always use post because it's safer, and it will cause less hair to fall out and less screaming and yelling and cursing at Microsoft. So let's just use that. We've already built an AJAX directory, but now we have to we want to get users. We haven't built this yet, but we're just kind of putting a placeholder in right now. We're going to build a file called get users, because we just want all the users back from the database. And then we're going to, the format in which it comes back is going to be this format. This is actually kind of standard. It's kind of doc type stuff-ish. And we also want to send over the parameters. Don't forget that. Now, in this particular case, these parameters are kind of dummy parameters, but if you wanted to build this out on your own and you have other more complex requests, I just wanted to show you how it's done. So we're going to send over the parameters, but we're just going to basically end up ignoring it. Okay, so now the only last bit to do on this is the AJAX PHP mini script. Okay? The AJAX PHP mini script. And that, in this case, is here, AJAX get users PHP. So let's go ahead and build that. And because I'm using Visual Studio, it has no idea what a PHP file is, so I'm just going to do this. Get users.php. Okay, and it builds a HTML goo in there, so we're just going to get rid of that. All right, so get users. Now, let's just try this first. All right, let's just see what happens. So let's reload this. Let's hit this. Nothing happens. Why is that? So let's go to console. XML HTTP is not defined. How is that possible? Didn't we just define it? Oh. Because I'm really dumb and I capitalize things where I shouldn't be capitalizing it. Okay. Here we go. Let's try this again. All right. So we know we've now sent stuff back to the server, the web server, come back, it's sending some stuff out. Now, why is it doing this? Well, because this is in HTML mode. It's not a PHP mode. If we actually wanted to evaluate, if we wanted PHP to evaluate, we'd have to set it up just like any other PHP file. And if we go back into this and hit get users, there you go. All right, so now we know that the link's been established, it's going back to the web server, it's coming back, it's hitting our stuff. Awesome. That means that all we have to do left is just write standard PHP code. So let's do this. I have set up a configuration file with all the passwords to the database already, and you don't have to do it this way. You can just write it right into the file, but I prefer doing it this way. It separates out all the stuff from the coding, because who knows who's going to be working in your stuff. I also have pre-set up a class to instantiate the database. So, oops. So all I have to do to really instantiate the database now is to, like in a typical class, call that, and now it's ready to take my SQL commands, which is, if I want to get all the users and all the information about the users, I say select user ID, user, let's see what else is in this thing. User ID, user email phone active, email phone active from user. And just for a little bit of niceties, just because this way I don't go crazy, let's order it by user. Okay? Now we just do standard PHP SQL manipulation calls, which is data MySQL query the database with SQL. And before we go into actually rotating through the data that comes back, let's just set up the table. Let's set up the table in which the data is coming in. The reason why I like to do this first, because you should always have a grid header unless you don't need one. But if I'm returning data back like this, I like to do the grid header. Set up the width equals 50, and that first column is going to be the ID. Second column is going to be the user. Third column is going to be email. Fourth, phone. Last is active, and I'll get rid of this last TD because I don't need it. Change the widths on it because these are going to be phone maybe 100. Oops, definitely not 1,000. Okay. Now, once the grid header is set up, now we can rotate through our data set and spit it all out into the page. PHP while row equals MySQL fetch, and I particularly, you don't have to, but I particularly am partial to fetch a soch. Got to close that off. Oops, I'm missing a parentheses. It's not happy about that. Wow. Let's go ahead and copy this. Create a row. And these are not going to be headers anymore. These are going to be grid data. Now you might be wondering, where's she getting these names from? I've already pre-established, pre-set up a bunch of CSS stuff in here called grid header and grid data because, you know, every single project I'm ever on, usually you're doing a bunch of grids and you're doing a bunch of tables and with grid headers and grid data. If it's for the same company, you want them to you want all the tables to look uniform. So I pre-set up a class that would do all this stuff. Classes that would set up a table the way I like to set up, and the grid headers and all that kind of stuff, and the grid datas. In this particular case, we don't need the widths anymore because they're already set up in the headers. You only need to declare them once. And instead of headers, we actually need the real data. So here we go. PHP echo row user ID. And in this case, it's not ID, but just user. And in this case, it's the email, phone, and active. All right. A lot of typing. Let's try it. You ready? Let's reload this. Get users. Spinner. Bam. Nicely set up table with nice widths. Let's get rid of this. Everything's working good. Just to make sure that this, just a little bit of a nicety here, let's make this active align equals center. And honestly, we don't really see, it's not really that humanistic to see 1 and 0. Don't really kind of get that. There, it's centered. Let's do this. Echo if the row is active, meaning if it's a 1, then we could just go ahead and return a yes. If it's not, otherwise, return a no. Okay, and then we should see Y and Y. That is AJAX. I didn't make a call to another page to return the table. I made a call on my page and manipulated this one area of this page, to show up the data that I went and got from the server. Okay? That's AJAX. Now, it's cool, it's clean, it's beautiful. That's all we got to do. All right. This has been Toy. I'm with educator.com. We're talking about AJAX jQuery. Stay tuned for more. Keep watching those lessons. We're going to get to some really cool stuff shortly. Okay, thank you.